She messed with the wrong homeowner. How I took down a corrupt HOA president. A woman in a cheap power suit slammed a violation notice on my doorstep, her smug expression daring me to challenge her authority. The fine was $100,000. She claimed I had violated multiple HOA rules I'd never even heard of. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that she had just picked a fight with the wrong homeowner. Because I wasn't just another resident in this upscale neighborhood. I own half the properties on these streets, including hers. It all started when I moved into what I thought would be a peaceful, elegant community. After years of building my real estate empire, flipping properties, investing in commercial and residential real estate, I'd quietly amassed a fortune. My goal was never to be flashy or attract attention. I enjoyed living under the radar, and that's exactly why I chose this neighborhood. It was supposed to be drama-free. That was my first mistake. The unwelcome welcome. I had barely parked my car in the driveway of my new home when an older woman in a sharp navy blazer marched toward me, clipboard in hand. Her eyes were sharp, her mouth set in a tight line as if she were about to scold a child for playing too rough on the playground. "Excuse me," she said, her tone clipped. "Are you the new homeowner?" I nodded. "That's me." She gave me a once-over, her lips pursed in disapproval, as if I were some stray animal that had wandered onto her pristine lawn. "I'm Cynthia Reynolds," she announced, president of the Oak Ridge Heights Homeowners Association. "We have rules here. I suggest you read the handbook thoroughly. You'll find everything you need to know about maintaining compliance." I wasn't worried. I'd lived in HOA communities before. Some were reasonable, others were little tyrannies. I wasn't sure yet where Oak Ridge Heights landed on that spectrum, but I had a bad feeling. Death by 1,000 violations. A week later, I received my first violation notice, a warning about my driveway. Apparently, the concrete was too light in color and violated the neighborhood's uniformity standards. I laughed. Surely this was some mistake. Then came another notice. This time I was fined $500 because my trash bins were visible from the street. I hadn't even finished unpacking, and the violations were piling up like some kind of ambush. I started talking to neighbors. Quiet conversations behind closed doors revealed the truth. Cynthia Reynolds wasn't just a stickler for rules. She was a tyrant. She ran the HOA like her own private kingdom, imposing arbitrary fines on residents for the pettiest of infractions. Some homeowners had been forced to pay tens of thousands of dollars in bogus penalties. Others had lost their homes entirely when they couldn't keep up. "She's been doing this for years," whispered Mr. Peterson, an elderly neighbor. "I tried to sell my house last year, but she blocked the listing because I hadn't pre-approved the color of my shutters. I had to pay thousands just to get permission to put my home on the market." The more I heard, the angrier I got. Cynthia wasn't just a busybody enforcing silly rules. She was running an extortion racket. The $100,000 bombshell. Then it happened. A thick envelope landed in my mailbox marked urgent. Inside was a document from the HOA detailing a list of infractions I had supposedly committed. The total fines, $100,000. I blinked, then flipped through the pages. My grass was too green. My windows reflected too much sunlight. My mailbox wasn't up to code. It was absurd. No, it was robbery. I stormed over to the HOA office, located in the neighborhood clubhouse. Cynthia was sitting behind a desk, lazily flipping through a magazine. When she saw me, she gave a smug smile. "Ah, Mr. Donovan," she said, forcing politeness. "Hear about your violations?" I dropped the papers on her desk. "You think I'm going to pay this nonsense?" She raised an eyebrow. "If you don't, we'll place a lien on your home. You wouldn't be the first." I narrowed my eyes. "You're seriously trying to extort me for $100,000? Cynthia leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "It's not extortion. It's the rules. If you don't like it, you're free to move." I smiled. "You really have no idea who I am, do you?" She scoffed. "I don't care who you are. The HOA has full authority here." I didn't argue. I didn't threaten. I simply turned and walked out. She thought she had one. She thought she had another victim trapped in her web. What she didn't know was that she had just declared war on the wrong man. How to topple a tyrant. I wasn't going to fight Cynthia on her terms. I wasn't going to argue or beg. I was going to dismantle her entire empire. Quietly. Efficiently. Step 1 was gathering information. HOAs may act with impunity, but corruption always leaves a paper trail. I talked to neighbors, casually at first, gaining their trust. Many were afraid to speak openly, but once they realized I wasn't just another homeowner but someone who could fight back, they started sharing everything. Last year alone, I paid $150,000 in fines, Mr. Peterson confessed. And nothing ever improved in the neighborhood. No new landscaping, no clubhouse renovations, nothing. She rejected our fence 3 times, said a young couple, Amy and James. Said the wood was too rustic. But then she approved the exact same fence for her friend down the street. Others whispered that people who resisted found themselves hit with surprise violations and threats of foreclosure. And if they couldn't pay, Cynthia swooped in and acquired their homes through shell companies. I needed proof. Luckily, I had an ace up my sleeve: connections, extensive real estate networks, access to public records, financial filings, legal experts. Within 48 hours, I had a detailed report in my hands. And what I found was worse than I'd imagined. Exposing the scam. The HOA was a front for a full-blown extortion and money laundering scheme. Cynthia and her board funneled fines into private accounts. On paper, the funds went toward community improvements. In reality, those projects didn't exist. The money never left HOA-controlled bank accounts except to buy foreclosed homes, which were then transferred at below-market rates to LLCs owned by Cynthia's family and friends. In 2 years, she had acquired 4 properties this way. I had enough evidence to bury her. But I wasn't going to expose her just yet. I was going to take everything from her first. Strategic moves. Using shell companies, I started buying up homes in the neighborhood. Families desperate to escape Cynthia's tyranny were more than willing to sell, especially when I offered them fair prices. Within a week, I controlled over 40% of Oak Ridge Heights. Next, I targeted the HOA board. Most were Cynthia's puppets, but 2 showed signs of weakness. I zeroed in on Robert Lane, the HOA treasurer. We met at a coffee shop, and he was a nervous wreck. I didn't know it was this bad, he stammered after I confronted him with the financial discrepancies. I thought Cynthia was just strict. She's about to go down, I said. The only question is whether you go down with her. Robert took a shaky breath. What do you need me to do? Perfect. With Robert on my side and my property acquisitions growing, I was no longer just a resident. I was the HOA's largest property owner. And Cynthia had no clue. The ultimatum. Then came another violation notice, $25,000 this time. Apparently, my front door was the wrong shade of beige. Cynthia was doubling down, thinking she could break me. I let her think she was still in control. Until I was ready. A few days later, she strutted up my driveway, her ever-present clipboard in hand. You're officially in violation of multiple HOA rules, she said, barely containing her glee. If you don't pay the fines within 30 days, we'll place a lien on your home. I raised an eyebrow. A lien over a front door? It's not just the door, she snapped. It's your landscaping, your mailbox, your window treatments, everything. I folded my arms. You really don't know who I am, do you? I don't care who you are. You signed the contract. The HOA has full authority. Good to know, I said, handing her a thick envelope of my own. She frowned, opened it, and her face went ghost white. This is an eviction notice, she stammered. That's right, I said. You've been living here rent-free for years, but you don't actually own your house anymore. The boardroom showdown. Cynthia didn't believe me at first, but she quickly realized I was dead serious. I had purchased enough properties to hold majority voting power in the HOA. I called an emergency board meeting. Cynthia arrived smug, expecting to shut me down. Instead, she found herself facing a mountain of evidence, financial records, bank statements, sworn affidavits from residents. You've been stealing from this community, I announced, sliding the files across the table. The room went silent. Cynthia's face turned crimson. This is nonsense, she spat. You're not a lawyer. You can't. I own 40% of this neighborhood, I said. I can. The other board members turned on her. Robert spoke up first, his voice shaky but determined. I vote to remove Cynthia Reynolds as HOA president. It was unanimous. Cynthia's last stand. But Cynthia wasn't finished. She formed a rogue HOA, rallying her few remaining loyalists to issue fake violation notices. She filed a lawsuit against me, accusing me of fraud and coercion. Then she made a mistake. She went public. She gave a tearful interview to the local news, painting herself as the victim of a hostile takeover. That was my opening. Within days, major news outlets ran the real story. Corrupt HOA president accused of extortion and fraud. The floodgates opened. Residents who had once been too scared to speak out now came forward. The HOA board crumbled. Cynthia's former allies flipped. Criminal investigations began. Fraud, embezzlement, racketeering, the fall of a tyrant. Late one night, someone slashed the tires on my car. A few days later, my security cameras caught Cynthia's cronies dumping garbage on my lawn. I wasn't worried. I had one final move. I called for another emergency meeting, this time with the entire community. We voted to dissolve the HOA entirely. Cynthia had lost everything. Justice served. Lawsuits followed. The district attorney filed charges. Cynthia's assets were frozen. Her home seized. And finally, one bright morning, I stood on my porch as police officers led her away in handcuffs. Her reign was over. A new beginning. The HOA was gone. The neighborhood thrived. No more ridiculous fines. No more fear. We created a new community association, one that protected homeowners instead of exploiting them. As for Cynthia, last I heard, she was working as a receptionist in a rundown property management office. A far cry from the self-proclaimed queen of Oak Ridge Heights. And me? I stayed, enjoying the peace I'd fought so hard to restore. Because sometimes the tyrant falls, and sometimes justice wins.